In today's video, I will give my thoughts on the RX 6500 XT. Now, controversially, this graphics card has been released in 2022, just in the last week or so, and it's got a very mixed reception at best. So today, I'm basically just going to give my thoughts on kind of like what the situation is as well with the market, and we'll just have a bit of a discussion. So it's just going to be a bit of a discussion video, this one. The problem with the RX 6500 XT, from what I can see, there's probably about 4 or 5 issues, but I would say, first of all, price is a bit of an issue. Well, should I say price to performance, I'd probably say is the issue. The price that you're paying in the UK is about £200 to £250, which 5 years ago, the RX 580 was actually released around about that sort of price as well. Now, one of the things with the 6500 XT is that it only has 4 gigabytes of VRAM compared to the RX 580, which, okay, was released with 4 gigabytes. It was also released with an 8 gigabyte version as well. And then later on, the RX 5500 XT was released with a 4 gigabyte and an 8 gigabyte version too. On paper, this does look quite bad graphics card in terms of price to performance. You know, you're paying more or less the same money as you were 5 years ago, but actually you're going to get a lot worse performance. I might throw up some sort of graphs and that from other YouTubers who have obviously slated this card a lot, but I kind of want to give more of a sort of rounded view about it rather than just sort of slating it and kind of looking at the current market. Yes, performance wise, I have an RX 580, and the RX 580 4GB is basically kind of keeping par, or a few games even actually outperforming the RX 6500 XT from what other reviewers have. Now, I don't have the card and potentially might get the card within a few weeks, but I'm sort of debating between that and the RTX 3050. So for me, I do think the RTX 3050 is looking the card to get at the moment. I would say for £300, if it's sort of released around that price, we'll see, then there is a lot of advantages over this current card. I do think the big problem with the 6500 XT seems to be, like I said, the 4 gigabytes of VRAM, the potential of the PCI Express needing 4.0 support rather than 3.0 support to actually maximize its potential. Has like 4 times lanes. I'm not exactly sure the technical side of that, but basically in the PCI Gen 4, it actually runs better than it runs in PCI Gen 3. Now, this is obviously a budget graphics card as well, so running worse with the Gen 3 stuff, which is probably what most people are going to be using. Like, you know, you probably pair this with like a Ryzen 5 2600 or 3600, or maybe even like the Ryzen 3 3100 is probably like what most people want to pair with this with. And all those CPUs unfortunately don't have support PCIe Gen 4, so again, there's another problem there with the graphics card. Also, the 2 display outs, the one HDMI and one display port, again, I don't really like that. I mean, especially considering my RX 580 actually has 4 outputs for a graphics card. I mean, I don't really get that. I would like to have seen at least 3, to be honest. I think 3 is kind of what you'd want for a minimum, but I can understand budget gamers probably are going to run only dual monitor, and for most people that's fine. But I think the big kicker, and I think this is one of the big issues with the 6500 XT, is the lack of hardware encoding. Now, basically, if you're a streamer, that basically means you're going to have to use software rather than hardware support. So you won't be able to use your graphics card to kind of offload bandwidth, and the sort of lag that you're going to get with your streams is kind of being offloaded with your graphics card. And obviously now, using software, your CPU is going to have to take all of that pressure to actually stream and actually keep up with the stream. So then if you're running one PC and you're not using like a capture card format to run your games, if you're using the one PC to game on, this is basically like impossible to stream now. I won't say impossible, but it's going to be very, very demanding. So it's almost like you're going to need a system which is going to be like way above what you'd get for a budget graphics card. So you probably need like a system worth like £800 odd or maybe more to then have the budget graphics. It doesn't make sense, basically. It's an odd one by AMD. I will defend it in terms of inflation, because inflation from 5 years ago, obviously, with everything going on at the moment, you don't need me to tell you that, but there's a lot of changes in the world, and inflation is a big thing now. Obviously, the cost of silicon's going up. There's a lack of silicon. Potentially, we might run out of silicon. I don't want to sound too down about things, but potentially, there is only a limited amount of silicon, and chips aren't. It's harder and harder to create chips, and more expensive to create these chips. So again, the price is going to be reflected in that. That's obviously why I haven't gone with the 8GB version of VRAM, because apparently, from what I've heard from a few sort of sources, AMD are probably paying about £10, maybe £15 per gigabyte in terms of like the actual like silicon that they actually put onto it, in terms of like the technical side of it. I don't know too much, but basically to add more and more gigabytes of VRAM, you're going to have to use more and more silicon, which obviously then costs more and more per plate which they use. A cost saving thing was to keep it 4GB. So it basically is a very, very sort of cut down graphics card in order to kind of meet some kind of market demand for what there is on the budget end at the moment, because we haven't seen a budget graphics card released in probably 3 years now. I'd say what the RTX, no, not even the RTX, probably the GTX 1660 or maybe even 1650 Super was probably like the last, I would say, release of budget graphics cards, I'd say. And maybe on the AMD side, potentially the RX 5500 XT was the last one. But again, those are quite old graphics cards. Well, fairly old graphics cards now. Not too old, but they are getting on a bit. But I do think the RTX 3050 will be a better graphics card. But again, the problem is that going to release at 300, 350? If it gets anywhere near £400, it's not going to be worth it at all from the specs that we have been roughly given. It's going to be a hard one, I think, and it's a tough pill to swallow, I think, in terms of where we are in the market at the moment with graphics cards. And the only thing I would say is, by having a new graphics card round about the sort of £200 to £250 mark, as bad as it is, it kind of might help the market to kind of stabilise a bit more, and we might see more cards around the £150 to £200 mark. And if we do see that, on the budget end, we will start to see a lot more builds being made, and we'll see a lot more progress in terms of the average price of cards sort of coming down, which is probably the only hope that the 6500 XT gives us, I would say. So yeah, to conclude, it's a difficult one. The RX 6500 XT, is it a good graphics card? Probably I'd say no. But should you go and get one? Again, it depends on your situation. If you're absolutely in need of a graphics card and you really want a game, then go ahead. You can get it, and it still is a decent card. in terms of the actual raw performance, okay, given the 4GB VRAM issue, you're basically running 60 FPS at 1080p low, so pretty much across the board in pretty much every game released so far. So in terms of performance wise, it is kind of giving you what you want as a budget gamer. So it's not like a totally lost cause. And there are some games where it actually does perform better. Certainly more in the more modern games, it looks like they take more advantage of the sort of like new technology, if you will, rather than the older games. The older games seem to run a lot better on like the RX 580 and your 1660. And yeah, overall, we're just in a bad sort of place for the graphics card market at the moment. We'll have to see what the RTX 3050 does. I think that's kind of the hope of what we're kind of wanting for our graphics card. But again, I think that is going to have compromises. Whether that will be released for 4GB of VRAM again, that would be an issue if it is. I'd love to see 6, but it's looking like it's going to be 4GB. As long as it performs better, which I'm pretty sure it will, than this graphics card, then I think that's going to be the one to buy. But again, you're probably looking at least £300 for that graphics card, which again isn't good value for money. Overall, I'd say if you're in the graphics card market right now, hold out, maybe see. It may be couple of months' time, whether prices might kind of stabilise again. I think eventually they will. I think we're kind of looking summer of 2022 until we really see sort of good stabilisation in the market, unfortunately. We can only hope for things to get better before then. So if you did like this video, guys, drop us a like. Obviously, please subscribe if you are liking my content. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.